the most important thing for a teacher, certainly at the primary school, is they have to love the children. You take your own Quran. In the first two siparas, it keeps on telling you, Pura tolo. What does it mean? Be fair, be honest.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. In this episode of Conversations with Syed Babar Ali, today we are with Babar Sahab, and our focus would be on an important but much underexplored and neglected topic, particularly in Pakistani educational, academic and workplace context, which is ethical leadership. My name is Jawad Syed. I'm a professor of organizational behavior and leadership at the Suleiman Dawood School of Business at LUMS, and with me the co-panelist is
this is the Dr. Zahoor Hassan, been at LUMS for 35 years, currently a professor emeritus in the business school, and I've seen Babar Sahab operate in a certain way all these years, and this is something, this area has been very close to his heart, so I think we are trying to take this opportunity to explore his ideas and learn from his experiences.
Thank you very much, Babar Sahab. So Babar Sahab, our first question to you would be that how do you define ethics, and can you give us some examples of ethics and your definition of ethics?
Ethics is your general behavior, how you conduct yourself and how truthful you are, how open you are, how you're not hiding anything. You have no other agenda except conveying what you want to do. And there is no other objective than to convey your true feelings. I think that would be one of the ethical issues that I would define.
Thank you. And in the leadership context, how would you define the role and significance of ethics in leadership? And if there are any examples which come to your mind?
Well, leadership, he doesn't have to say anything about ethics. It's his general conduct. The way he behaves, the way he interacts with people, the way he conducts himself, especially people who are of a lower strata than him. Certainly how he respects his colleagues, not only his colleagues, but people who are maybe many steps below him. A leader is not announced as a leader. He becomes a leader because everybody believes that he is superior to them in his thinking and his behavior. He doesn't have to act. He has to be natural. And that is, I mean, the best example that one can cite is of Mr. Jinnah. He conducted himself impeccably. He didn't sort of claim to be a leader. He said, I'm just your advocate. I'm trying to plead your case to the general public, to the British, to the general, to the world, that the Muslims of India require or need their rightful place in society. And people respected him, they accepted him as a leader because they knew that they could trust him. He wouldn't let them down, he wouldn't sell them. He was not for sale. Even 70 years after he passed away, people still revere his memory, and there's been nobody like him.
So Babar Sahab, here comes a question which I'm sure Dr. Zahoor also has his reflections on this, that you very rightly pointed out that in the 70 years we unfortunately did not have any precedents of Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah. What could be the possible explanation that why are we so ethical leader starved in Pakistani context?
You see, most of the leaders, I mean, I would say the leadership that we had till 1958, when Ayub Khan took over, were ethical people. Liaqat Ali Khan, Nazmuddin, and people from East Pakistan, Surwardi and others. But when Ayub Khan took over and declared martial law, and then he sort of took over all the leadership and all the responsibility, not only responsibility, all the decision making. And then of course people who wanted to take advantage of that, they surrounded him, they created him into a demigod, and from there on the rot started, and it's one followed one after the other. So that's been the tragedy.
So Babar Sahab, taking a cue from this, then maybe in your opinion, leadership emerges out of a process or a system. So you need to have the right system for the right leadership to emerge. And I think we have been talking in the context of political leadership. But when one looks at business leadership, what should be those elements in the overall organizational processes which help create or develop people who can uphold these ethical standards?
Well, in business, you know, it's no different than in politics. You have to have a behavior which is an example, which should be exemplary to the rest of the company. I mean, he has to treat his colleagues, irrespective whether he's a blue collar worker or a white collar worker, he should treat him with respect, he should listen to him, he should spend time to develop the people that work with him. And so I would say that, I mean, leadership in business, you know, either you take a company and then the ownership or the person who is responsible for the development of that particular company, if he does well, and other people who are in similar situations, they think that he's done a better job than others, they would then emulate him, they would talk to him, they would see how they can learn from him, and how you know, they can leverage each other's skills and knowledge, so that the business community as a whole has the same kind of behavior or same kind of success as an individual will have. And that depends on how uniform they are in their thinking. That is very important, that they should be thinking, they should have similar values, and that is how they treat their employees, how they treat the government, how they pay their taxes, how they treat their customers, how they treat their suppliers. So it's a whole sort of range of different conducts that you have. It has to apply across the board with the same kind of diligence and the same kind of ethics and the same kind of values. You can't say that I'll be honest to this man and not honest to that person. It has to apply across the board to everybody.
It's very interesting, Babar Sahab, you started talking about ethics from a very different perspective, and then in the end you are talking about the financial and the tax issues. Usually people start from the other end, which is sort of unusual. So when you look at your extensive experience and exchanges with people, so you probably had to take decisions on these ethical issues. So can you share with us some of the most challenging aspects, because where you had certain things which were very good, but other things were not acceptable, and a certain action had to be taken? How do you address those trade-offs?
Yeah. Well, you see, unfortunately, you know, you pay taxes, you pay property tax, you pay income tax, you pay excise tax, you pay this tax, you pay that tax, and the minute you start sort of cutting corners or trying to you know, sort of do not what is correct, then the people who are tax collectors, they come to you and tell you how you can save your taxes, provided you share whatever you save with them. And we've never tried to compromise on that. We'd rather pay whatever it is due than to have any concession by short-circuiting it or by benefiting somebody else. I mean, whatever the tax is has to go to the government.
But in some ways, the other aspects of being transparent with your people, taking care of the people, that's more difficult to measure and assess. So, how does one go about making sure that the ethical standards on the people side are also adhered to?
Well, I mean, if the people who are working for you, they have to march to the same tune. There is no question of anybody trying to work in a different way. You have to spell out to them what are our values, what are the the qualities that we expect of them, and very soon they learn. And we've not had much problems in that, because they know that we are not trying to cut corners, or we are not trying to bypass anything.
So, Babar Sahab, you refer to values. So, where are these values coming from? So, for example, there are many leaders in Pakistan in the business context, in the academic context, in the political and economic context. And it would appear for a novice like me that they are subscribing to a different sets of values. For you, where are the sets of values coming from?
Well, I mean, I was very lucky. My parents were the main sort of people who inculcated these values in us. And one kept on meeting people who had similar kind of experience and similar. I'll tell you a very interesting story. Ferguson's, you've heard of Ferguson's, they are the leading company of chartered accountants and auditors. They are one of the partners at the time of partition was a gentleman by the name of Chapman. And he told me the story. His father was a missionary, and Chapman grew up in Allahabad. And he said one day he was going to school on a bicycle. And if you haven't been to UP, we have a Tonga here. In UP, they have a vehicle called the Ikka, which meant only a one person sat in it.
Okay.
It was a single person, and he was hanging on to the Ikka while he was bicycling. His father saw it. When he came home, he said, "Why were you hanging on to that Ikka? Did you pay the fare?" I mean, this was the something that he narrated to me just to sort of warn me as a young person. I was maybe 25 or 26 years old, starting a business. He said, this is what his father told me. And I can tell you, I used to play polo at that time. And he had his representative here in Lahore who was doing our audits. And he sent him a message, make sure that Mr. Babar Ali's polo expenses are not being charged to the company. These are things that we weren't doing it, but he was very vigilant. And this is how you keep on learning from people that you interact with.
So it would appear that, at least for the gentleman that you referred to from Ferguson, that at least some of those values were coming from, probably from the missionary background.
His father, and of course, I mean, these auditors are supposed to be, they are supposed to read out the Riot Act to everybody who they audit. They used to. I don't know whether they do it today or not.
So could then we also construe that religion could also be one source of values?
Oh, absolutely,
for us?
Absolutely. I mean, you take your own Quran. In the first two separas, it keeps on telling you, Pura Tolo. What does it mean? Be fair. Be honest. I mean, people are putting a premium on learning surats and learning, being a hafiz without understanding what they are reciting. Quran is full of things which, if one were to practice, there'd be no problem in this world on ethics. It keeps on guiding you. It tells you that even if it's your brother or your son, if you are in a position, if they do wrong, you have to give a verdict against them.
So, given that we have this huge reservoir of understanding and guidance through Holy Quran, and of course through the Seerat of our sort of prophet and other religious personalities, But still at the society level, at least I have this feeling that we are moving away from these norms rather than actually improving ourselves. So, what could be the underlying reasons for this?
Well, the whole system is so corrupt. You know, when it comes to elections, you keep on buying votes at all levels. When it comes to the voting at the Senate level,
so it's everywhere.
Everywhere, round the clock. I mean, it's rotten to the core.
So, if we have to focus on improving this, then maybe one has to start with the younger people. Where should we start? I mean, to address this issue.
I think you need to get leadership that will not tolerate it.
Okay, and again the question is the leadership will come from the system.
Yeah, so but I mean,
so that's the difficult one. That's the difficult one, you see.
Yeah, look at your own prophet. He came from the system. Everything was wrong among the Arab society.
Yeah.
And he challenged the system.
He challenged everything, and he practiced it.
And he actually converted people on the strength of his character, basically.
Yeah.
Right. So, if one were to look at our current situation, a general feeling that on the ethical standard or these standards, we are far from where we need to be, especially if we look at many other societies. And a lot of people say that this is one reason why we are in our current state of affairs. So, one option is to hope that we will get the right leader or try to get the right leader. But people like us who are involved in education or involved in developing people, what would be your advice as to how we could actually?
Well, I mean, take it to the classroom. I have been, associated with Asian College. I have been talking to the principal. He being an Australian, he doesn't understand what I am trying to convey to him. I said, start at the junior school. Get the kids out of this habit of looking for grades. Their mothers come and arguing about marks. Abolish the grading system, even abolish examinations in junior school. After every year you promote them to the next class.
Yeah, and give an overall assessment guidance in terms of
and it should start at the school level. But when they come to the college here, to the university, it's your job. Spend 5 minutes every day in the classroom telling your students that, they keep on asking me, what do you expect of a LUMS graduate? I said, only one thing, he'll never tell a lie.
But maybe the best vehicle that we have available are the instructors or the teachers at different levels, because they have to exemplify this behavior. So, maybe one should start at that level rather than the students, because unless
I mean, each teacher has to be exemplary in his own behavior and in his own conduct.
So, Babar Sahib, you have been instrumental in building many institutions. You are still involved in many institutions, mashallah, very actively, and I know you have always propagated these things. But can you share some of the things that you have done to make sure that these institutions operate in an ethical way and the leadership in these institutions is ethical, so that others can also maybe take some guidance from your approach?
Well, I mean, you tell your people that we are not going to save on taxes. That's the number one area. And when you say you're not saving on taxes, you're not saving, when you're buying things, you pay on time, you pay the right price, and you pay, buy the right quality. So there is, it goes right through the system. You have to compensate people for their effort. And I keep on telling our people that all your suppliers must make money. Otherwise, you will not have a good supplier for long. Here on this campus, I've been interacting with the contractors, and I've been telling them, I've been asking them, do you make money? And if there have been 3 or 4 instances where they didn't make money, and I said, what was your loss? And they said it was X, and I wrote a check for that amount, because I want him there as a contractor for the next building. So you got to make sure that everybody lives. You don't have the monopoly of being the only successful businessman.
So in this context, Babar Sahib, the question would be that you, as a founder of LUMS, what would be your advice to other founders and rectors and possibly vice chancellors, how and what they can do to develop faculty members and academic administrators who are role model in ethics?
Well, one is merit. He or she has to be absolutely, have the highest credentials as far as their academic qualification is concerned, then their own behavior. They have to be, their end product is a student, and they have to be helpful. I keep on repeating the story about one of my very favorite professors at Harvard, Jim Austin, that Zahoor, you knew him.
Yeah.
And I used to visit him whenever I went to Boston. And in his office, on his door, as a reminder to him, he said, "Have you helped any student today?" So, I mean, I have taken on that on myself. Why should it just be a student? Have you helped anybody today? And there's nothing more rewarding than to hold somebody's hand to help them cross the street, or help them cross a channel, or help them to, overcome their business problems.
Yeah. So Babar sir, when you were talking about getting people on merit, so merit should include not only their academic qualification but also their attitudes, right? So one has to put a lot of emphasis on understanding how they approach others and this dimension.
Their behavior, I mean, unless, in a school, for instance, the most important thing for a teacher, certainly at the primary school, is they have to love the children. Otherwise, you'll never be able to get across the feeling at all.
But the challenge which I'm sure Dr. Zahoor also, and also I have been facing, for example, in terms of the pipeline of faculty members, sometimes the ideal candidate may be there and sometimes he or she may not be there. What can we do to develop them?
Well, you keep on spending time with them. I mean, the real test of a good, call it a leader or a good mentor, is that the person that he is mentoring, his effort should be that this person should become better than me. I mean, every teacher's effort should be that his student has to be better than him.
But unfortunately, there are insecurities in our society.
I mean, this is something that, that is how we make great nations.
Yes. Okay. So, Babar sir, when you look at specifically the academic institutions and especially the junior school level, I mean, an incident was narrated to me about HSN actually. So, I just want to share this with you. Actually, by one of my sons. He struggled at the undergraduate, at the junior level, was not really focused on. And I very recently had an opportunity to talk to him about it. Now he is mashallah 26, 27. So he indicated that in one of the classes he was asking a lot of questions in the class because he was not too clear about this. And suddenly the teacher walked up to him and slapped him on the face. Okay. And he said that was the day when I switched off. And it took him 2-3 years to actually come out of that mode. So I think it's very important that these things are sort of set in terms of the norms and behaviors and development of teachers. In my view, unfortunately, this dimension of teacher development is not ignored. And now, given that we have a school of education here, you think this should be one of the key agenda items? Absolutely. The attitudinal part in terms
Absolutely. If you don't ask questions, you'll never learn anything. And the teacher, I mean, should encourage people asking questions, because this is how the teacher learns. It's a two-way traffic. When you teach, you understand the subject much better.
And you need a lot of patience and maybe.
Then you should. I mean, if you want to be a teacher, it is a missionary kind of a decision on the part that you got to serve humanity. I don't know of any teacher in my days who died rich.
Yeah, they were more focused on, you see, getting.
They were worshipped by their students for being there. I have treated all my teachers when I was at college like my father. Respected them. So this is something that has to be inculcated in you. But the teacher himself has to conduct himself in a manner that the student feels that ultimately feels it is in their interest. I've seen many times how I was treated harshly, but it was in the long run, it was in my interest.
No, again, and one also recalls that teachers who would cane you when you were talking in the class, but you always understood the reason behind that, and you appreciated that, at least later on, if not at that time.
I mean, I've been very fortunate in having the teachers who took me under their wings. I failed in my English paper in my senior Cambridge, but I did so well in the other subjects. I got 2 gold medals at H.N. College, my senior Cambridge, and Cambridge then gave me a compensated failure.
Okay.
They said his English is not good, but his other subjects are great, and we'll give him a certificate. And then when I went for HSC, I was very lucky. I had a teacher who is no longer alive. It's Victor Kiernan, who translated Faz and Iqbal. You may have seen him. He took me under his wings, and in 2 years, my English was as good as anybody else's in the class.
So Babar sir, within the educational context again, you expressed your desire to me and also to other colleagues here at LUMS that you would like to see uninvigilated exams at LUMS.
I'm still after it.
Yeah, we understand that and we appreciate this. But somehow or the other faculty members here and we have not been able to implement it. What could be the possible explanation from your perspective?
They don't have confidence in their own self or in their school, in their students.
What could be done to achieve that goal, that we have this trust in our students, that we can leave them uninvigilated?
Set an example. SSC is a school where I have more leverage than anywhere else, and the dean there said we are going to do it this year. I said, forget about the rest of the schools.
We used to do this in our business school, if you recall, earlier days. And even some of us, most recently in my last class that I taught, they said that, okay, we'll have cameras and all that. So I don't want cameras.
No.
I just want the student to sign an honest statement stating that I have not received any help or provided any help from anyone. That's good enough for me. And it worked out fine. We don't have any
at
issue.
your own university, Stanford.
Yeah, that's the
you
honor
have a code.
Honor code, right? That's the way it works. No, you see, many of these things are related to dimensions which are very complex in terms of the approach of the instructor, the norms of the society, the pressures of the parents in terms of the grades, as we understand. So, in order to move in a certain direction, you have to start somewhere. What is your view on this perspective that maybe the starting point should be to change the reference point? It does not matter whether you got a higher grade or a lower grade. It is what you have learned which is important. You think that's the approach, and then all these other things hopefully will go in the background.
Ultimately, that is what counts in real life. Nobody ever looks at the gold medal of a person when he's hiring him or when he's promoting him or the grade that he's got. There's only one question you ask. I've had the opportunity of appointing many managing directors in different companies. Only one question: is he honest?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, many other things are sort of taken for granted that he'll know his job and
That's the only one. So this is something I keep on drilling it when I get an opportunity to talk to the students, that this is something which is 100% in your control. I have seen in life, from my school days, because I've not kept track of the students graduating here with 10 medals around their neck at the time of the convocation, as to what happens to them later in life. At H.N. College, I remember people, getting X number of A's or B and C. Where were they in later life? Nowhere.
Was there any single or more than single experience in your life which you considered a single major ethical challenge where you were faced with a trade-off?
No, luckily, because I won't dabble in anything otherwise, but I've seen people who were, I give you one example. My closest friend at H.N. College was Harcharan Singh, who was a Sikh. And in around 1941, 41, there was this Quit India movement started by the Congress for the British to leave. And Mahatma Gandhi went on fast unto death So everybody was, and my friend Harcharan, he was a nationalist in the sense that he was a follower of the Congress party. So he wrote a letter to Mahatma Gandhi to say that we are praying for you and I come from Eastern College and this and that. And that letter of course was intercepted by the intelligence agency and they sent it back to the principal. He said Eastern College is supposed to educate people who are loyal to the British, and here is a student who has written a letter to somebody who wants the British to leave. So Mr. Barry, who was the principal, called Harcharan and said, Sonny, did you write any letter to any politician? He said, yes sir. What did you write? So he narrated exactly. He said, you know, you are studying, there will be plenty of time for you to get into politics later on. While you are here, you just concentrate on your studies. He did that. So it was all forgotten. Harcharan partition took place. Harcharan went, was belonging to Firozpur, which was on the other side. He went into politics. He became a minister. And the first time he went to his village as a minister, the local sub-inspector of police, Thanedar, came to salam him. And he brought a file that was in the Thana. A letter from Mr. Barry to the DC of Firozpur to say that here's a snake in the grass, you have to watch him.
So he did.
This is the kind of vigilance that the British had even on students at Eastern College. They wanted to make sure that they are, but look at Harcharan, his honesty. He never apologized to Mr. Barry. He said, I wrote to him because I revere Mr. Gandhi.
Yeah. You see, when we teach different things, I mean, just taking a cue from this question, we do not go into the character aspects of individuals. We just narrate the facts. And it used to be, I think, this used to be a bigger focus in the earlier years. Our curriculum has shifted away from this. We used to have small stories which emphasize the character aspect.
Hikayat used to be
right, and I think, and I still remember some of those things which come back to you. How different people treated other people, how they were kind to other people. So my view is that we have gravitated towards more material things and left these other things totally, ignored them, and sometimes we have even made them less important. And that is one of the reasons that we are where we are. And this would require a very major shift in our overall approach to developing people. So we are looking at education as a way of people being able to add, multiply or write or things like that.
Zahoor sir, is it to do with our curricula? Is it to do?
I think it has to do with many things. We have commercialized things. First of all, education has been, in my view, commercialized thing is a business. It should not be.
Orientation.
Yeah, and then when you are a commercial, then you try to highlight, you see some of the material benefits. I mean, if you look at the ad, they say, okay, so many A's, so many A stars from our institution. Nobody talks about accomplishments of the type that we are talking about in terms of what these people have contributed. So our reference points have shifted significantly. And I believe that will have to be brought back gradually probably, and maybe with some examples.
One possible outcome which I experienced here at REDC, for example, in the past 3 or 4 years, sometimes I teach leadership development and team management to C-suite or C-1 level managers and leaders in Pakistan. And Babar Sahab, 99% of them or 98% of them happen to be men. So is that to do with our system in which women do not have equal opportunity?
Yeah, I think there has been a general bias against hiring of women, but it's now is turning around. One of the things that I would suggest at the REDC, you teach Sadi.
Yes, go back to the basics you see in terms of, yes.
You know, I mean, I spent 9 years at Eastern College, and the only thing I remember is Sadi, which was a minor subject that I studied. He tells you everything in life.
Philosophy, wisdom,
giving, piety.
Yeah, those are the things which are totally out of our curriculum.
No, I mean, I think there should be
at all levels.
A lesson on Sadi.
Yeah, and part of the leadership.
Yeah.
At all levels. Yeah. So again, coming back to the business side, the same challenges are there in business organizations. That how do you develop people? How do you establish those norms? So, you have been instrumental in creating large organizations, helping them grow and develop. To what extent you think, if you had to do it all over again on the ethical dimension, what would you do differently to make sure that that ethical model that you have in mind is reinforced and maybe enhanced in these organizations?
I won't do anything different.
So
I
it's
mean,
the same thing.
While I was, for instance, the Fertilizer Corporation, I can tell you a very interesting kind of challenge I had. Mr. Bhutto, was the president, and he was all powerful, and he was very friendly with a Greek businessman who settled in Paris by the name of Andrei Moutsopoulos. Andrei was a very clever businessman. Though he was Greek, he went to Paris and he told them that he had very good relations with Pakistan, so they appointed him as agent for many of the French, Mirage, for instance, the plane, and this and that. And also he was representing a French machinery manufacturer called Crusoe. They had supplied fertilizer plant to Multan before I took over, and we got money from government to expand that plant. And of course, Crusoe was very keen to get the order. And I discussed with our engineers there, and they said they have had nothing but trouble with this plant, and it has never worked properly. It has never delivered what it's supposed to do, and we will not recommend that we buy a Crusoe plant. So one day the minister, Mr. Rafi Raza, called me and he said, "What have you decided about this Multan plant?" I said, "We are still evaluating." There was an American company, there was a British company, and there was an Italian company. And I said, and I can tell you it's not going to go to Crusoe, and that is, he's the favorite of the president. And I said, you better go and tell the president that if he insists on Crusoe, then he has to look for another chairman for the Fertilizer Corporation. He said, are you serious? I said, yes, you go and tell him that. And a week later, I got a telephone call from Rafi Raza. He said, I've talked to the president. He said, let him do what he wants to do.
Yeah. So you have to draw your lines and then you get that support.
Yeah. So, I mean, so I didn't hesitate to tell them on their face what was the right thing. Even in a meeting with Mr. Bhutto, I mean, there was one meeting, where all the chairmen were sitting there, and the head of PIDC said, each one wanted to win favor with Mr. Bhutto. He said, we are looking at a paper mill, and we are looking at Ladkana as a location. And he said, who's going to decide? He said, Dr. Ahmad Shahnawaz, who was head of the design corporation, he was PhD from MIT. And he said, Dr. Shahnawaz, what is your advice? He said, wherever you like, sir. I put my hand up. I said, I know a little bit about paper. And Pakistan can only afford a large paper mill once every 3 years. It should not be based on any other consideration than technical and economic. He said, I agree with you. But he didn't like it. Some years later, Rafi Raza told me, he said, Mr. Bhutto asked him, he said, and how's that clever man Babar Ali doing?
But he did notice we picked up the idea at least. Yeah, at least one has to give the acknowledgement.
I mean,
the merits do hold in the end.
Not my department, not anything, but I knew little about paper because I'd set up a paper mill.
Yeah.
And this was country's money. So you stick your neck out and say, this will not happen.
Is there a price of being ethical?
Whatever the price is too little.
Did you ever have to pay a price?
I mean, I didn't want the job. They wanted me.
That's always a good feeling. I mean, when you know that, okay, you can walk away from this without any reason. So then you can do the thing that...
Yeah, but I mean, you should walk away from any job.
Yeah, exactly, at any level.
How far could one go, or how far should one go in being ethical?
Totally.
All the way.
If you start compromising, then there is no limit.
Yeah, yeah. But this is something which is not that well understood in my view. Would you agree with that? Most of the people look at this as a trade-off, as an,
Well,
and that's where the problem starts.
Then they'll keep on
Compromising.
fighting their own conscience the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
They justify it, unfortunately. They rationalize
No,
it through their,
just Just for outside. Inside, अगर ज़मीर है तो it will keep on pricking you. If you have a conscience.
So again, this whole area is such an important area of being ethical and looking at all these things. And what I am taking away from this interaction is that it all starts with how you behave with people around you. Whether it is your students, whether it's people who are working with you, and whether they are your superiors, you need to maintain a certain decorum across all the dimensions. And if you do that, then you can always prosper. So if I am, say, a teacher at the junior school level, what would be your advice in terms of what would be the 2 or 3 things that I should always keep in mind? And if I am a vice chancellor of a university, would the advice be same or different?
Well, let everybody feel that you have a concern for the people you are working with.
Care.
With the kids, it's love. With at the university level, it is respect for your colleagues in the faculty, respect for the students. You should be totally available to the students. I mean, in the last 70 years that I have worked, I've never had anybody sort of make an appointment for me. They just open the door and walk in.
Being available all the time. Yeah.
If they see somebody else talking to me, then they wait outside and then come back.
Yeah. But unfortunately, this is not the norm anymore. So, and if I were to take the liberty, say, things have gradually, especially when institutions become larger, they tend to move in the other direction. So how does one overcome this tendency?
I mean, you lose your, you think that the larger the organization, the more important you are.
Yes, that illusion.
You referred to role models, and you referred to Jinnah. And I reckon that Jinnah could be one of your role models. Do you have any other role models in terms of ethics?
No, I mean, Churchill, for instance. You know, Churchill led the British to victory, but he was thrown out. And if you know the British system, you know, he was given the highest title called the Order of the Garter, which he declined. And somebody asked him, he said, why did you decline? He said, what will I do with the garter when the nation has given me the boot? You know, I mean, he was somebody who realized, oh, he was totally, you know, very undesirable as far as India was concerned. He was very unsavory about India. But as a human being, the way he conducted himself with the British society, he was absolutely superb. Another example, you know, during the war, he used to go to America quite frequently to meet with Roosevelt because America was providing all the support. And once in Washington, he was invited to address the Congress, both the Senate and the House of Representatives. And his opening sentence was, "I am a servant of the House of Commons."
So I think, as you mentioned, Churchill, I mean, a thought comes to my mind is that in a certain context, he upholds certain values. But in a different context, in an Indian context, one would place him at maybe the other extreme.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So how does then one make that judgment call as to the nature of the person? Because
you pick up what is good with him and
to focus on the good part. And I think this is one of those things that we don't do enough. We tend to focus on the negative parts rather than trying to extract the positive.
Things, and then you see what you can learn and emulate from that. And I mean, I remember, you know, I had a very good friend in government. He was a secretary to government, H.U. Beg. He remained as finance secretary for a long time. And I was sitting with him one day, and he came out with an expression. He said, "You know, a government never gets angry." You know, here was a secretary to government, a policy maker. He made this profound statement, a government never gets angry. And in Islamabad, there's nothing but everyone sort of running for that person's throat.
कहते हैं ना कि रियासत माँ की जगह होनी चाहिए हैं जी. I mean that's another way of saying this.
दरख्त की तरह छाए में हर लोग, everybody should sit under the shadow of that tree.
Again, building on this, if we were to look at a number of personalities, and I would specifically request you to focus on the female personality, we don't put enough emphasis on the female. What are some of the examples of things that leaders at different levels can take from some of the major female personalities in our history or in our recent times? Anybody come to your mind?
I would skip the religious leaders. That is something, you know, they were exceptional. But I mean, during my own lifetime, we produced some very great women leaders. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, but most of them were non-Muslims. You know, for instance, Sarojini Naidu was called the Nightingale of India, and you seldom come across people, women of her stature, who were so ethical and so noble and so outspoken.
Anybody from the business side? You have not mentioned anybody from the business side in any of your examples.
No, I would not. I mean, they were good business executives, but not something that one would emulate.
Role models. Any men within Pakistani business context who could be role model as
in any leaders? Maybe limited way, where you could say that okay, this is one could get from this person, this we could pick up from.
I'm sure there are many.
But you have interacted with so many people.
And any one or two which come to your mind?
In maybe in a certain focused way.
Yeah, as a banker, Amar Khan. He was a banker. He started with his career with the State Bank, and then he became head of the Banking Council, which controlled all the nationalized banks during Mr. Bhutto's time. He was sterling, ethical.
In terms of his dealing with other
dealing with people, dealing with everybody, humble, modest, but effective. No compromise on what he did.
So Babar Sahab, you referred to Mrs. Sarojini Naidu, and also the fact that she's a woman and she was from a non-Muslim background. Pakistan is an excessively diverse country in terms of religion, in terms of ethnicity, language, and so on and so forth. Do you think that for leaders, whether we are business leaders or academic leaders or political leaders, is that also an important reference point in terms of management of diversity for being ethical?
I would say it's not the monopoly of any one particular area or one particular gender to be ethical. I mean, women are as ethical as men are. I mean, they're honorable, they are modest, they are generous, they are philanthropic. I mean, one has a lot of respect for these people, and I would say that no, I mean, this needs to be encouraged, inculcated, and I think the duty of people like yourselves who are in the classroom, you have to keep on pointing out that the future depends on your children, through the students.
Sir, taking a cue from this last question, a lot of people feel that if you have access to diverse opinions, diverse perspectives, that helps you improve in terms of handling different situations and appreciating other people and valuing other people. So that takes us to the need to have organizations which are more diverse in terms of the mix of the people that work there. Similarly, in class, you want to have people from different backgrounds. How important is this dimension in terms of making sure that we develop people who have these attitudes?
No, that is very important. This program that you initiated here of National Outreach Program, where we bring people from the disadvantaged background, after the first few months when they get acclimatized to the new environment here, I'm sure that they become much more, they contribute more to the discussion in the class because they come with a different perspective. That has to be encouraged. That, and both boys and girls. And I have met many of them from different parts of the country, and they are second to none in their general value system, their ethics, their behavior, their commitment to the country, to their families. One of their biggest, I think, plus point is that they are much more loyal to their family background than people who are more affluent.
They are much more appreciative of what they have rather than what they don't have.
And they want to share it.
Exactly. No, but in organizations also, is it important for large organizations to actually look for diversity in their hiring processes so that they could bring in?
Yes. We want people with different skills. An accountant or a finance person or a production person or an HR person. We want to encourage people with different skills, and also coming from unfortunately in Punjab you don't have people who are non-Punjabis too many.
As compared to say Karachi, there you get a lot more diversity.
Yeah, so here we are not able to get that diversity. In Karachi we do, and unfortunately when you want to transfer them from Karachi to Lahore, they are not. They rather.
But maybe this is one area where large organizations need to put in more effort, because that will help organizations grow.
More lucrative for them. They are happy to go abroad. Everybody is happy to go abroad.
But there are other incentives and reasons for that. Yeah.
Achha, Babar Sahab, your views on this topic, on ethics, on leadership, on ethical leadership, have they evolved over time? For example, the way they used to be, those views 30 years ago, or then they used to be 50 years ago?
The more I meet people, the more I learn, the more I think.
What's the single major streak of difference that you would notice, for example, compared with 40 years ago?
You can't take it with you. You have to give.
Giving in hopefully more ways than just money. Knowledge, whatever you have.
Time, passion. Love.
Yeah.
Advice.
You appreciate that more. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Of course.
And in terms of relative priorities of what's more important to achieve the objectives, has that also evolved?
Well, give it where it has a multiplying factor. Education.
Education, you think, is much more important than you
you
probably realize.
With infinity.
Yeah. Okay.
Health is the other.
Yeah. Okay.
Just one more question, just to perhaps reinforce and clarify to myself. If you, based on your, mashallah, very rich experience of life, personal life, as well as social and professional life, if you were to identify right now 2 or 3 main vices or unethical issues facing Pakistani society, what would be those 2 or 3 issues?
Only one issue: truth.
Truth. So the lack of truth is something which has to be
in everything.
And I think this is such a simple and a powerful thing. And when I've been talking to some people who are going through education on religious side, I said, you talk about the basis on which the religion of Islam got propagated. It was those 2 aspects of Hazrat's character, Sadiq or Amin, right? So if you just focus
one
on
word, that is truth.
Truth.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Which captures it.
Which captures it. And if you do that, then everything else follows from there. It's so simple but so difficult to do actually. Thank you Ji for your time.
I hope this was useful.